Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And gig 'em, Aggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean for Graduate Programs, here with your spectacular host, Ben Wiggins.
Hey, Shannon.
How are you?
What's good?
Pretty much everything.
It's a beautiful day in Aggieland.
It is a beautiful day in Aggieland. It's a little chilly, but nice and sunny and gorgeous. Gorgeous, darling.
Indeed.
Today, I think we have the coolest guest yet on the show. We welcome Nathan Wolfe. Nathan is a strategic leader with experience in finance, content, and partnerships across the sports and entertainment industries. Most recently, this is what makes him cool. He's cool anyway. He most recently has served as the head of Nonfiction Co-Productions at Netflix. He led their nonfiction co-production business, managing creative and programming strategy, series development, and commercial negotiations. He grew the slate to over 100 series through partnering with leading networks and award-winning producers around the world. He also worked on the Michael Jordan The Last Dance partnership with ESPN, which I loved and Kyle loved, and the Formula One Drive to Survive series in partnership with Formula One, as well as the very popular Great British Baking Show. Nathan graduated from Texas A&M with a BBA in finance, so we are very glad to claim Nathan. He had a lot of great insights in addition to his perspectives from Netflix and the series that he's worked on, but also just great insights about making some pretty significant career transitions from finance to the NFL and then to Netflix. He currently lives in Los Angeles with his wife, who is also a Mays grad, and their 2 children. And as he shares in the show, he's transferring to Texas soon. So we hope you enjoy the episode with Nathan.
Welcome home, Nathan.
We welcome Nathan Wolfe to the show. How's it going?
Man, I'm doing well, man. How about yourself?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. It is our pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What is your favorite superpower?
I have to say, something to do with time, right? So the ability to manipulate time, bend time. I think, it's the most precious resource we have. And I think the ability to control that would be just so phenomenal. You've seen the movie Palm Springs with Andy Samberg?
Have not.
It's phenomenal. And to be clear, the movie gives me tremendous anxiety, but it's a lot like Groundhog Day, right? With Bill Murray.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking as I was watching that, but what if Andy Samberg could control time? So every day ends and he wakes up and he's right back in the same spot. But what if instead of that, he got the option to say, hey, I want to document that one, put it in the books, or I want to re-record it. I want to do it again, but I want it to be additive to whatever I did yesterday. I get to do it on top of, whatever I do today, it's on top of what I did then. I don't know. I think there's some superpower in and around that I'm I want that thing, but it's basically like playing God. It's not going to happen.
One of the benefits of that, whether you're getting the choice to repeat or not, is if time eventually does scoot forward from that day and you're not just stuck looping forever, there's so much you can learn. In Groundhog Day, I haven't seen Palm Springs, but in Groundhog Day, Bill Murray learns to play the piano. He learns to ice sculpt. Spoiler alert on a 30-year-old movie, but when he finally relives the day for the last time, the first thing you see is him ice sculpting with a chainsaw. It's super cool. And yeah, so Palm Springs, I'll have to put that one on the list.
Yeah, it's a must watch. And you're good, man, on the spoiler alert. Statute of limitations on spoilers in the streaming era is just not that long anymore.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Katy, just a little west of Houston. It's actually funny, like kind of in no man's land between Katy and Houston. Like I feel like if I said Houston, all those that grew up like inside the Loop Memorial would be like, yeah, you didn't grow up in Houston. But if I said Katy, all those that actually grew up in Katy would be like, yeah, you didn't grow up in Katy.
Right.
So, I'm kind of West Houston.
Right. A man of no country. What was your greatest challenge as a child?
My wife would always joke that I had more of a fixed mindset as a kid. I liked doing things that I was really good at, and I hated doing things that challenged me and pushed me. So like, the best example is like in school. If I was like particularly dynamite at a subject, I'd be willing to tackle the AP class or the honors class. But like, if I wasn't, but knew I could, if I was good but not great, I was like, I'm just going to do the academic class to get the A.
Yeah.
Didn't like challenging myself. And that probably, I feel like that changed when I got to A&M actually. I really came back from some pretty poor first tests to doing well in some courses. And I feel like it actually shifted my mindset a little bit to more of a growth mindset, wanting to tackle things I wasn't great at.
You kind of swung to the opposite end because the industries that you've worked in are considered among the most challenging and competitive that there are. I mean, I always say like sports, entertainment, finance, politics, like that's kind of the Mount Rushmore. And you're on your third of those.
Yeah.
And so why do you think that you went all the way to the other end? Because in my experience, people move from a 1 to a 3 or a 4 in that respect, but you went from a 1 to a 9 or a 10. Why the complete flip-flop?
I definitely got to a point where I really liked a challenge. I really, and I don't know what it was about my psychology or demeanor or upbringing that unlocked that. I do think that inflection point was, like I said, freshman year at A&M. But I do think that I think a little bit of like success breeds confidence. Mm-hmm. And so, you do well in that second round of tests that freshman year. And then, you go from getting into no student organizations to getting into a couple, and then maybe being, in a leadership position in one. And you kind of just, it was like, okay, like I can do this. Like I my wife will sometimes say like, your confidence is absurd. like you just think you can kind of do anything. And I really believe that. I really believe that, like, if I really put my mind to it, like I'll figure it out. And I think I've got a track record of having done that now in a few different industries and careers, such that I don't just think it, like I believe it. And so, I don't know though. I don't know what that moment was or that upbringing or psychology was that caused me to make such a radical shift.
Tell us about how you moved from banking in your early career through sports and then eventually to the media industry. How did you approach those career transitions?
Yeah, so I studied finance at A&M and spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do coming out of school. And several friends, suggested like, hey, you should check out investment banking, right? It's gonna open more doors than it's gonna close. I think you'll like it. It's competitive. It's kind of a macho industry, and it pays really well. I was like, check. I'm in. So I interned at Citigroup in Dallas. It was a generalist office, and found my way to New York as an analyst. So graduated A&M, moved to New York City, was a generalist or was in the generalist pool, and ended up getting placed in the power and utilities group at Citigroup. So basically valuing power plants and distribution systems and, really sexy stuff. And I really quickly realized like, this is not for me. I think with the benefit of hindsight, my approach to figuring out my banking career was I just wanted to be around cool people. And so when we do like the drinks events and things as part of the analyst program, when we're getting placed into teams, I just really liked the people on that team. I didn't really put much thought into, well, the group you choose is going to likely be the industry that you begin your career in. And so I probably should have thought about that a little bit more. And so, a few months into banking, I knew banking and likely high finance wasn't the path I was going to go down. And I was certain that power and utilities wasn't the industry for me. And so I felt lost. So, I'm by myself in New York City. My fiance is still at A&M. She was in the PPA program, so she had one more year, was wrapping that up. And I just felt like, what am I doing? Like, I don't like banking. I really dislike the industry I'm working in. What do I want to do? And I thought about, I interviewed at the Fed. I interviewed at interviewed for the FBI and CIA. I interviewed at Teach for America, and I didn't get any of those things. And I think it was this real period of I was lost, and I think that was probably so evident in these interviews. And so I finally just kind of took a step back, and I have a moleskin. I think it's around here somewhere, but I literally went in and I just started writing down everything I like to do. I was like, I like to play video games. I like to watch TV. I like to go to the movies. I like to, and I would look at this list. I kind of took a step back and I looked at this list, and everything kind of was in and around media and entertainment, gaming. And I was like, there's a trend, there's a pattern here. And I'm in New York City. Every major media company in the world at least has some sort of presence here. And another theme on that list was sports. And I thought, the revenue driver for most sports leagues is media. And so there's a real crossover there between kind of these two things. I wonder if I could ever get into a sports league and kind of work my way into the media world. And I from that point, I went out and I emailed everyone I knew, said, hey, if you have anyone or know of anyone that works at a major sports league, NHL, NFL, MLB, Major League Soccer, let me know. I'd love to reach out to them and meet them. One person responded to that email and put me in touch with a guy at the NFL, which was eventually my way into the NFL. And really into media as well.
And so tell us a little bit about what you were doing with the NFL. You got hooked up there, and what was your day-to-day like?
So I got brought into the NFL in kind of a combo role of an analyst and a sales executive for their international media business. So, Sunday Night Football is on NBC in the United States. Our job was to sell Sunday Night Football to the NBCs of Brazil and the UK and the Netherlands, et cetera. And so a big part of my job was to go out there and figure out what those rights were worth. So that was kind of the analyst part of my role. So go and say, what's the ad market like in Brazil? Maybe taking a step back, who are the television players in Brazil? What does the ad industry look like there? How is the television business supported? Is it subscription or ad revenue driven? And then try to triangulate roughly what we thought the rights could be worth. And, in some instances it was a finger in the wind, and others it was a little more of an informed calculation. And it gave us a baseline as to what we might be able to expect in a negotiation. And so the other part of my job was to actually go out there and do it. So go sell it, right? So go talk to that NBC of Brazil, in this case Globo, and see if you can convince them to take a package of NFL games, be it Sunday afternoon or Sunday Night Football. We had a variety. This is about 2010, 2011. And so at this point, digital rights are becoming much more mainstream. So streaming rights, mobile rights, it's hard to imagine, but even 10 years ago, it was pretty uncommon to stream certainly live content on your mobile device. But we were just seeing the beginning of that. So I got a little bit of a taste and a flavor for what that kind of next frontier in media was going to be. And it was really intriguing to me. But anyway, yeah, so my job was to sling these big game packages, as well as sell NFL Network, sell NFL Sunday Ticket, mobile rights and just figure out like kind of strategically distribute the content around the world and really like with an aim to both maximize dollars and also exposure, right? And those two things can be in conflict a little bit.
Right. And it seems like one of the most important pieces of that sales process, especially adapting it through multiple territories, would be establishing a global mindset, which is a big priority for us here at Maze as well. What advice would you give to your past self if you had this phase of your career to do over again?
I think I would have maybe considered taking some more risks. And that might sound funny because in some ways I took some
huge risks.
Yeah, huge risk. But I also feel like I played it safe. I was a little more coin operated. I was always looking for like what was going to pay well. Although I did forego a bonus my second year at the bank to take the job at the NFL, so that was something to at the time it seemed like a huge decision, and in hindsight it was the best decision. But I don't know. I think what I've learned is as you get on in your career and you have more obligations on the home fronts, it's a lot harder to take big risks and walk away from maybe something that is, really, paying the bills, putting food on the table, and just throw yourself into something else that you might not be able to monetize for some time. And I had talked to a couple startups in those early days when I was really not enjoying banking. And I feel like, I wonder if maybe I'd had a slightly different mindset about working at one of those companies and not just making money, if maybe those conversations may have played out a little bit differently. And a couple of those companies have been pretty successful. And I kicked myself a couple of times about that.
Well, that's interesting. So let me push back on that a little bit. It sounds like you may have contradicted yourself a little bit in what you just said, because you said that you were a little bit coin operated at first, but then when you described the opportunities that you passed on, you said that those companies have done really well. But I would argue that maybe the way your career has actually unfolded has been more built around job satisfaction, if you will, and maybe a little bit less around the bottom line. So in a way, I would argue that the way you have solved your problem is potentially a much better answer for you than working with those startups who have become so successful, because it makes you, to wit, less coin operated. What do you think about that?
Totally valid. I think you're right. We have the benefit of hindsight as we sit here today and knowing kind of how it all unfolded. I think it's very likely I could have not made one of many decisions that have put me in the role I'm in today that may have resulted in my not being as successful. And I think about that last question of like, what advice would you give your past self? And I do feel like I played it safe from time to time, and I played it from a place of prioritizing financial security. And like, I just don't think that at 22, the difference between making, I'll probably date myself, like $38,000 and $50,000 is really that big of a deal. But I felt like coming out of school, there's 0% chance I would have entertained the $38,000 job. I would have 100 times out of 100 gone for the $50,000.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's kind of what I mean. I think I had that attitude up until, honestly, maybe even up until the last couple of years. And that's gone with some time and some perspective. But it took me, it's like a part of my professional maturity that took a decade plus to kind of realize.
For me, floor has always been kind of important. Ceiling, maybe not so much. Now ceiling is becoming a little bit more important. And I think that calculus changes, kind of the elements of all of this in terms of how you think about career change for most people in some degree, in some respect, as we get older, but not always, but it's different for everybody. The elements that become more important over time versus less important over time, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I took a course at A&M called Titans of Investing. It was taught by a guy named Britt Harris, who just a phenomenal individual and great professional, great lecturer, friend. And he was really big on like, have a number that you're aiming for in your career that you may or may not achieve. But if you do achieve it, like kind of reevaluate your life, like reevaluate why you're working. Like I've always thought about that. And I'll be honest, I don't have a very specific number. I think I have a range in the back of my mind, but it all goes towards like financial independence and the ability to do what you really want to do. And I've like forever, I've said, I want to be a high school baseball coach. That is like my dream job. And it's like really, a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, you've had all of these amazing opportunities and careers and that's your dream job. Well, like, yeah, but it didn't provide for me financially the way that I would need it to. And so it's still in the back of my mind that, you know, if we can find a way to hit a home run or even a solid double, maybe I can kind of my twilight career can be as a high school baseball coach.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you moved over to Netflix. How did you? This is your second major career transition. What was different about how you thought about the decision that time versus sitting down and writing down everything that you liked and then reaching out to everyone on LinkedIn and saying, hey, connect me with people who, you know, are, you know, involved with sports, NFL, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, I knew what I wanted a lot more in this transition. I knew I wanted to stay in the media and entertainment ecosystem. I knew that I had I think I was a lot more confident. I was coming off of, you know, having 4 years of having negotiated, you know, contracts, media licensing agreements around the world, and had done it pretty successfully. One of the things that I was very aware of was that I hadn't necessarily, media is kind of sports, news, and entertainment. And I had done sports well, but I hadn't really done entertainment or news. And I thought those industries could be interesting. And I've always in the back of my head, you know, never formally, but have a list of a handful of companies that I admire, that I like their brands, maybe even just as a consumer, but are companies that I would consider working for. And and look, candidly, Netflix was on that list. And I was a consumer of theirs for years on the DVD side. They brought me back in when they released House of Cards in kind of, I think it was early 2013. And so we're sitting here kind of mid 2013, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. I felt like my time at the NFL was coming to an end. It's a great place to start or end a career, but it's a tough place to grow because it's a dream job for so many people. Don't really leave the NFL. And I found myself in a situation where it was like, look, if I want to continue on this great trajectory, I think I'm going to have to find something else to do. And so I just got connected through a friend who said, hey, I know a woman at Netflix who's looking to build her team. Netflix, just to put the company in context, it was in, I think the Americas, I think it was in the US and Latin America. It had about probably somewhere between 25 and 30 million subscribers. It had 3 or 4 original series at this point. So a very different company than it is today. But I still, like, as a US DVD consumer and being a new streaming consumer, I admired them and thought, you know, hey, it'd be a great opportunity for me to go, you know, round out this entertainment skill set. And so get connected to this woman who's looking to grow her team that will be responsible for basically building up the content offering for upcoming European launches. So Netflix will now be available in Germany and in France, and how and what will that offering look like? So the way media rights work, right? You kind of you license them on a territory by territory basis. And so if like, let's say Netflix goes to Disney and it's like, I'm interested in licensing Grey's Anatomy that you produce for ABC Television Studios produces for ABC. You would license that, and it's a separate negotiation if you want those rights in the US versus Europe. So my job was kind of go out, figure out what's available in Europe, and then it both create both a programming strategy of like what percentage of features versus television series should we have, what percentage of those should be dramas, comedies, adult animated fare, and then thinking about nonfiction, how much should be local, and then actually go out and execute it. So have these negotiations with, and as I learned about what this role would entail, I was incredibly overwhelmed because I was like, man, I like television, but I don't know a lot about the business of television. But I know how to negotiate these license agreements, right? That's what I've been doing that from a sales standpoint, not a buying standpoint. It'd be good to kind of round out that skill set. It would be good to learn the business of entertainment, but I was very honest that I did not know that. They'd be making a bet on me to learn that. And it was a company I admired. So to me, it was like, and I was also a little bit tired of New York. I'd been there for almost 6 years at that point, and I was ready for something else. And I thought that moving to LA, because that's where the job would be headquartered, would be a really fun and exciting kind of proposition.
Netflix has grown from 800 to 8,000 employees during your 7 years there. What has changed the most? What have you learned about effective leadership as the company has grown? What has that evolution been like for you?
I mean, it's 800 to 8,000 employees. It's 4 original series to, I think we'll probably have over 1,000 Netflix branded originals this year.
Is that including features or just episodic?
Including features.
Okay.
But it's a staggering statistic. I think if you appreciate and know what goes into making even just one television show. Mm-hmm. And it's really revolutionized the industry. I mean, everyone is chasing Netflix now, right? Everyone's trying to get into the streaming game and do what they did so well. I've learned so much. I mean, first off, Netflix has, in my opinion, one of, if not the most visionary leaders in business today in Reed Hastings. I think he is a phenomenal leader. I admire him tremendously. He has been unflappable and always thinking ahead. And it's someone I truly look up to. I think Netflix has a really specific culture deck. I'd actually encourage anyone listening to go and just Google Netflix culture deck or go on Netflix's website and you can find their culture memo. But in, I want to say 2007, 2008, they published like an 80, 90 slide culture deck, which became like a bit of a Bible in Silicon Valley for building a successful tech company. And a lot of the things I have learned have been very much from that. And it's not like, I feel like so many organizations, schools, businesses have, principles that are, maybe like engraved in the lobby of excellence and honor and all those things. But like, I feel like oftentimes the employees couldn't even tell you what those things were. Netflix is not like that. I mean, everyone knows the tenets of Netflix's business are freedom and responsibility. So bring people in to do the best work of their lives, to give them the freedom to do that, but then hold them responsible for doing the best work of their lives. And I really admire that. So a couple of the very specific things, I think being highly aligned and loosely coupled. And so really what that means is, getting buy-in, getting to agreement or even just alignment. Doesn't even always have to be agreement quickly, and then getting out of people's way to allow them to execute that and not having to go to 6 different departments to get approvals to realize that thing. And the speed with which that allowed Netflix to operate made it phenomenally successful. I also think Netflix was great at understanding that for its business, and this isn't true of every business, but for its business, like being accurate was a lot more important than being precise. And so you didn't need to always have the perfect answer. Like moving fast and being directionally in the vicinity of where you wanted to head was great. And then you took the feedback and continually improved and like got closer and closer to the answer, but all the while moving super quickly. And like I contrast that even to the NFL where I worked previously. where I would say actually the NFL is a business that needs to put more emphasis on being precise. It is going to go and renegotiate its media deals that bring in, billions of dollars annually. It needs to get that right. They are cementing their revenue stream for the next, maybe near decade. And it's not something that you can just be accurate with and that's sufficient. Like you need to nail that. And so I think I learned the appreciation of like when decisions needed to be accurate versus precise, and more often than not at Netflix, it was accurate and move quickly. And I think that was such a great lesson to learn, and at a really fairly early stage in my career.
In that respect, what has been your most rewarding project? What brought that together for you? What was the what was the best expression of all of that?
Yeah, I have two. I was really adamant for a long time that Netflix needed to have more sports on the platform. And I knew live sports wasn't likely the best path for that. I think for a variety of reasons, it actually didn't make and maybe still doesn't make great business sense to do live sport. But there's great sports stories to be told. I think 30 for 30, right? I think it's a great example. And some of the stuff that like HBO's done, Hard Knocks, these follow docs, 24/7. I always was fascinated by those types of programs. And so I thought a lot about what could that be for Netflix? And I was really fascinated by Formula One. Formula One was a sport that is globally probably the third or fourth most popular sport. It's just not very big in the United States. Right. And it was a really interesting opportunity for both of us because Netflix has a really big United States consumer base and trying to grow rapidly internationally. And Formula One has a really big international fan base and trying to grow rapidly in the United States. And so I was like, we can actually really like mutually serve one another through this partnership. And so I led a negotiation that eventually unlocked the Formula One Drive to Survive series that aired on Netflix 2 seasons ago and is in, 2 seasons are on Netflix now, and a third season is in production. But I think that was, that deal was 2 years in the making. It was there's a lot of process associated with that between the league, the 10 teams, the 20 drivers, and getting buy-in and it's an expensive show because you're traveling the world to tell this story, and you also can't. It's not scripted, right? It's a nonfiction. It's a documentary series, and so you kind of have to tell the best story with what actually happens. And we've been really fortunate to partner with some phenomenal filmmakers that have really brought that to life. And I don't know. That one in particular, just really, I'm so proud of that series. And then the other one is much more common, and many more will be familiar with it. But The Last Dance, so the 10-part Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan documentary series that we co-produced with ESPN. So effectively, us and ESPN fully financed that show. So The Last Dance, although it premiered on ESPN in the United States, it actually premiered on Netflix and is a Netflix original series everywhere outside of the US. And Michael Jordan, having been probably the most popular person in the world in the mid to late 90s, it was a phenomenal success for us in every way. And it was humbling just to be so near the greatness.
Yes, yeah, I can imagine. In that vein, the word on the street was that Michael Jordan exerted a significant amount of creative pressure on The Last Dance. Rather than saying true or untrue, what was the most obvious way that his personality helped shape that series?
I think it's very evident in the show. Michael always wanted to be the best in whatever he did. And being involved in a television series was no exception to that. We went into that, with the expectation that we were going to win an award and we were going to create one of the best sports documentary series that had ever been made. And we felt like we had all the ingredients. We had this 500-hour archive that had never before been seen. We had access to Michael Jordan, to all the key players on that team. And we felt like we also were telling a story that could do a great job of it's not just a sports story, but it's a bit of a nod to pop culture throughout the 90s as well. And we just thought we could thread the needle perfectly, much like OJ, that OJ Made in America did. We felt like we could tell we could do three things. We could tell the story of the 97-98 Bulls. We could really do a great job of telling Michael Jordan's story. And we could also tell a bit of a story of 90s pop culture. And I think we nailed that. And I really think his tenacity on the court pushed the team to ultimately get to a place where we produced an Emmy-winning series.
Fantastic. Michael Jordan, as you said, was the biggest star in the world in the 1990s. You've probably worked with and had the opportunity to meet a good number of famous people and celebrities during your time with Netflix and, with the NFL as well, possibly. What's the most starstruck you've ever been?
Netflix's lobby is like Grand Central stardom. It's you go in there on any given day and it's, Queen Latifah, Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston. It's just A-list star after A-list star. Angelina Jolie, Seinfeld, Obama. I've not met all of these people, but certainly seen all of them. And but the most starstruck I've ever been, actually. So in 2012, I was working at the NFL, and Texas A&M football team was having quite a season. As many of you might remember, this was the year of Johnny Manzel, and our first year in the SEC, and he kind of took the world by storm and was electric and was a Heisman Trophy finalist. And so was it, I guess it was the Verizon Theater in New York. And it actually fell right around my birthday. And I had convinced the guy who's in charge of scheduling at Netflix at the NFL to reach out to his contact at ESPN and secure me 2 tickets for my wife and I to go to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And so we went to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. We met Johnny. We were rubbing elbows with Kevin Sumlin and Cliff Kingsbury, which was a phenomenal night. And then, of course, capped off by the fact that Johnny wins the Heisman Trophy. So phenomenal, right? And as a huge Aggie sports fan, that was such an incredible moment. So fast forward 6 or 7 years, a couple years ago, my boss wanders into my office and he's like, "Hey, Johnny Manzel wants to come in and pitch a show." And I was like, "Fantastic!"
Wow,
yes, this is amazing. So Johnny and a couple of producers come in and pitch us a project that kind of documented his life. And I got to sit there and it was so hard to be cool. So hard to be cool. And I really was. I think I was, but I don't know really. And Johnny proceeds to kind of tell his life story. And at this point, he's gets drafted in the first round by the Browns. He, plays okay at points, but certainly hits a low, gets kind of kicked out of the league. I think he'd done some soul searching at this point. And shares in this pitch that he had recently been diagnosed as bipolar, which he then went on and shared on Good Morning America and actually the podcast last week. And so I'm getting to hear all this and and I think in that moment I idolized him in a way, right? What he did for A&M football, I think is probably maybe the single-handedly the biggest contribution to our athletic program, to A&M's athletic program to date. And and even to A&M, I think he made A&M cool, which is really, growing up as a kid, if you had told me A&M would be really cool one day, I'd have been like, I don't know. And this is coming from somebody who went there and thought it was really cool, but A&M is hip. And I think Johnny gets a lot of the credit, but sitting there in that room with him, listening to his story, he kind of he kind of transformed from like Johnny Football to Johnny Manzel to me. And like, I grew to like, I walked out of that like really respecting him as an individual, not just a football player, and kind of the challenges that he's, undergone in his life. And look, he's far from perfect. I mean, none of us are. But I don't know. It was just this like really powerful moment where I got to spend an hour with him. And it was a really awesome story.
I feel like honestly, the best possible time for that show is right now. I feel because access is pretty straightforward if he were still interested in doing a show like this. And I mean, the idea of kind of the fall from grace and the sort of maturing into maybe a more complete human, I think is a fair way of describing it. I think that would be a great story for 2020 and maybe for 2021 as well. And the access issues, I don't think there would be any access issues at this point other than, COVID.
That's not a small one, but yeah, it can be managed. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Maybe you should produce it.
That's a good idea. Can we talk about your upcoming move? You alluded to this earlier. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in the last few months, my family and I decided that we were going to make a big transition. We were moving back to Texas. I'm leaving Netflix. There's I think a few circumstances that led us to that decision. I think I really like building and growing businesses. I've kind of found myself around that in the last 10 years of my career, where at the NFL, we're growing this international media business. I think we nearly doubled it in my 4 years there. Come to Netflix, and we're launching the business in each of these European territories. Then I move over, and we change the way major studios license content to Netflix. And then I go and I work on kind of non-English language originals and on the kind of ground floor of helping get that business up and running. And then I find my way to like nonfiction and reality and take what was, zero originals in that space to in 3 or 4 years being kind of the market leader in nonfiction and reality series. And
right.
I realized through that, I like being attached to building things and growing things. And at this point, like Netflix is built. Netflix, at least is the part of the business that I'm most familiar with. Like we're not going to rebuild the nonfiction side. And so I kept thinking about like what my next challenge was on that part of the business. And I just didn't feel like I would be quite as engaged, quite as impassioned by the work. And couple that with, on the personal side of things, my wife and I both grew up in Texas. We've always felt like we probably find our way back. Never really knew what would be that kind of that thing that drew us back, if it would be a professional opportunity or family or what. And I think COVID kind of highlighted just how far we were from family and good friends. And we can move to Texas and have a really great community in any number of cities. And that was really attractive to us. And I think, we've really prioritized our professional pursuits to date. And I think this was kind of the first time where we at least equally weighted our professional and personal pursuits. And for us, that was really important. And so, kind of at this crossroads professionally of wanting, frankly, just a bigger problem to solve than I currently had, and wanting to get back to Texas. And we felt like, let's do it. Let's take a leap of faith and make the jump.
What's the scariest piece of it for you?
The self-doubt, right? I mean, every day, like I work at the market leading streaming company, and it's the company everyone is chasing in the industry. And I'd be lying if I said I don't have moments of like, what the hell are you doing? Right? Like, why are you making this decision? And I'm sure my parents have thought that as well occasionally.
Uh-huh.
But again, it kind of goes back to maybe even a rational confidence. I'm really excited about what's next. I'm really excited about the possibilities out there, be it in film and television, be it in maybe audio, maybe producing, maybe doing something completely unrelated to what I've done. I'm kind of in that exploratory phase of figuring out what might be most exciting next. And I've been really encouraged. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said there weren't like real periods of self-doubt of just, wow, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want to be doing? And moving, like I said, kind of the low of Texas earlier, right? It's moving to a state where media and entertainment is not at the forefront of major industries that people people and businesses operate in. So
Yeah,
a little nerve wracking.
I imagine. What's the best way for fellow Aggies to think about career or life pursuits outside the Southwest and especially outside the state of Texas? What's the best, most specific advice you could give to Aggies who are thinking about, all right, what's beyond Texas here?
I mean, I think just an understanding that there's a big world out there. Every device, every app, everything you interact with on a day-to-day basis is a company. It's a business. There's people behind that. And it's understanding that if there's something in your life that you're passionate about, like go pursue that, right? And so I remember when I was at Mays, there was a guy who was 2 years older, so he would have been class of 06, but he'd interned with ESPN. And I remember thinking, man, that is so cool. So cool. ESPN is not the type of company that comes to the Mays Business School job fair. Jobs in media and entertainment were not something that were commonplace. And I remember just thinking like, whoa, it had not even crossed my mind that you could go and work for a company like that. But like everything you interact with on a day-to-day basis, be it the media, be it the content, have marketing groups, finance groups, accounting groups. Like there are those opportunities. There's also opportunities to go out and be creative I think, especially with the benefit of hindsight, I realized I didn't know. There's so much I didn't know about opportunities out there. And it was only when I moved to New York and met different people and talked to them about what they had done when I really started to wrap my head around, wow, there's a lot of really cool things out there. And then again, moving to LA and kind of getting that baptism in Hollywood and in entertainment, realizing, wow, it is such a vast industry. You can be in physical production, you can be in post-production, you can be a creator, you can be a network executive, you can work in a back office function for any of those capacities. And there's so much industry around making a television series or a feature film. And I think that's really cool. And I would just encourage people that if you are interested at all in a particular thing, just canvas the Aggie network, right? Canvas your personal network, canvas your parents' networks, find people in and around those spaces. I think you'll find people are probably more than willing to talk to you, or certainly more are than aren't. And it's just kind of a networking game. Every job I've gotten has been through someone I know. I'm a huge believer in networking. I never took a job except maybe at HED where I applied. Everything has been like an introduction to someone. Even my internship at A&M was a former fellow who introduced me to the head of the Citigroup office in Dallas. And every subsequent step was, again, some introduction from someone else. So
our friend Porter Garner is smiling right now hearing you talking about the Aggie network. Rapid fire.
Yeah.
Most valuable failure.
I didn't get promoted at the NFL. The year I left for Netflix, I was up for a promotion. I was virtually guaranteed it, and it didn't happen for a variety of reasons. And it stung, and I thought it was like a career low point. And in hindsight, it was such a blessing. It was the sign I needed to get out and pursue and chase another opportunity, which ended up being Netflix and entertainment.
What is your favorite book?
The book I'm reading most often right now is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I think I've read it 4 times in the last 3 days to my kids.
Is that another kid activity that's become a dad activity?
I really like, what is it called? I really like, there's this book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I think it's by Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah, that's right.
I really enjoyed the approach, the kind of narrative approach, the fictitious story approach to teaching those lessons. I also am a really big fan of The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. I think it's a personal finance book. I'm a bit of a personal finance junkie, and I found that book to be incredibly illuminating.
Anyone you would like to send some good bull?
I'll send some good bull to my wife, Allison, who's also a fellow Aggie. She has been, we've got a lot of big transition in our life right now. Moving from Los Angeles back to Texas, moving potentially careers, maybe industries. And she's just been my rock through it all. Like I said, I've definitely experienced some self-doubt, and she is the voice of reason and the sounding board that gets to put up with that and tolerate me. And she's been amazing throughout this, and an awesome partner, awesome mother. And it's been an exciting chapter of life, and it's been particularly exciting because she's been by my side through it.
Fantastic. Good bull to her. I'd also like to send good bull to Gary and Sandra Darnell. Gary was the defensive coordinator here at A&M when I was a GA under Coach Fran. And we saw them in Austin a couple of weeks ago. Great people. Good bull to them, and good bull to Allison as well. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Know it's very valuable. And thanks for speaking with us.
Of course, Ben. Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
We hope you enjoyed that conversation with Nathan. He's such a neat guy and has had some amazing experiences in his career. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaway, I wanted to talk about just a little thing that Nathan said, where he talked about one of the most important things he's learned at Netflix is to be accurate, but not necessarily precise. I think that was how he said it. To me, that reflected the idea that perfectionism can certainly get in the way of some really good things, and that he needed to work towards accomplishing those really good things, even if it wasn't always perfect, which I know can be even harder in the creative space for some people too.
Yeah. Good is the enemy of great, and perfect is the enemy of great.
Yeah. We used to always say the best dissertation is a done dissertation, not the most perfect one. So those kinds of things are important mantras to remember throughout life, to be able to accomplish some of those hard things that oftentimes trying to make them perfect can get in the way.
Yeah. Also, what he was talking about was classic lean entrepreneurship. Get an MVP, minimum viable product, minimum viable service, minimum viable version, and then start iterating. Get the feedback and make it better. Mm-hmm. Get it in the world and then make it better.
Yeah. And in that, invest only what you need to make it good enough to start testing it, right? And that includes time and energy, not just money. Invest just what you need to get it ready to go out and test it.
Right.
It's great. For our second MasterCast takeaway, I wanted to talk about the non-traditional career path that Nathan has taken. And there's a couple of things that really stood out. The first one was just the confidence that he has. He talked about how he can be a little bit overconfident, and that's important in thinking about being able to make those kinds of big pivots that he's made, is being confident in yourself and not feeling like you have to have every bullet point on the job description to apply, but that you have enough to be able to make a contribution to a job. He also talked about networking and how powerful that was in his career transitions. He talked about being willing to move away. So moving to LA, for example. And he talked about branching out and not taking the traditional path that maybe some of his peers were taking, and seeing that one person who was doing something different, who was going to work for ESPN that was a year ahead of him at school, and how that really inspired him to think about branching out a little bit, doing something that his peers weren't doing.
I think the most important things to kind of riff on with all of that is, first, networking is a little bit of a tricky beast in that in order to really do networking right, you have to care about the other person as well. It's not just building the biggest Rolodex you can of people that you've exchanged 3 sentences with. Like, building meaningful relationships is a must for all of that process. And there's a reason that people say the job always came from someone that I knew, not just someone I had met. It's someone that you have an actual relationship with. And if you think about it, who are you going to recommend for a job? It's not someone that you talked to one time and handed you a business card at a cocktail mixer. It's somebody that you had an actual meaningful conversation with at some point. Keith Ferrazzi talks about, the difference between networking done right and networking done wrong in his book, Never Eat Alone. And there are many other great resources out there for doing it right. The other thing that I think in what you just said is really living the questions in terms of figuring out what's important to you. Because for some people never really feel the need to try something super new, to go for a career in a much higher risk industry. Yeah. And that's okay. And I tried that and learned that it actually really wasn't for me, that I like the stability of the financial sector. I like the stability of traditional business. And where I want to take my risks is actually in entrepreneurship within that frame. And I like being able to spend time with my family kind of whenever. Not that Nathan doesn't get to do that, but many people in sports and entertainment work 100-hour weeks, and in finance as well. So it's really a question of kind of iterating not just on what you're putting into the world, but what you are taking away from your career. And figuring out, all right, this is more important to me than I thought. This is less important to me than I thought. And kind of working your way toward the career path that is most ideal for you.
Yeah, it's interesting because you and Nathan have had somewhat similar career paths. You did a little bit in sports, you did a little bit in entertainment, and now you're doing finance. They've been in a different order, but somewhat similar career paths. And just you've laid a really solid foundation for yourselves to do some interesting things going forward, whatever that might look like. But it took some investment there to figure out what you wanted to do and to explore some opportunities that maybe weren't the long-term career path that you wanted, but it was interesting at the time, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it hadn't been for all that, we wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, for sure.
Yeah. For our last takeaway, I just thought it was really cool how Nathan talked about leaving really a legacy of bringing more sports through the partnerships that he made at Netflix to the platform and bringing the Formula One series. And then, of course, Last Dance, which I love, and being able to make that mark on Netflix, which will seem to have such a lasting impact.
The idea of figuring out where you want to take your risks, so to speak, is always a really compelling one. And it's funny because when you talk about businesses, the legacy of a business that didn't do as well is always wrapped up in they didn't see the value of this new thing, or they put too much time and energy into all of these things that were away from their core business. So you have to get it right. You have to try new stuff. You have to innovate to some degree or another. And the success or failure of those risks will determine your legacy. And, if you're wrong in either direction, there will be a proverb made out of it. So it's really hard to figure out, all right, where do we want to put our chips? And I think the way that Nathan is thinking about those questions is really admirable, and time will tell, how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think what you said too about not getting too far away from your core business is really important. So for Netflix, live streaming sports is probably too far away from their core business, but bringing more sports related series might get them what they're going for. And that's what Nathan's done so well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes, not that this is anywhere close to where Netflix is, but I think of newspapers. And the story with newspapers is that all of them said the internet is not our core business. And they may have been right. The problem with that is that their core business itself was going to become obsolete at some point if that were true, because the web is the future of news. But And so I think Netflix is currently in a much better position, but there will come a point at which, Netflix and every major internet giant of today is faced with, all right, this is the corner that we appear to be turning. How do we stay in line with our core business while turning the corner into the 22nd century?
Yeah.
Or 2050, whenever that next frontier shows up.
Yeah. It's great. Do you want to close us with a quote?
Yes. So this is a quote from Lord Byron, but it's also, I spotted it on a friend's Instagram. So thanks to Lyle Rowan, Lyallrowan. He's a friend from Rice, from our Rice days. Lord Byron, then stirs the feeling infinite, so felt in solitude, where we are least alone.
Very appropriate for today.
Yeah. By the way, to our listeners, if you like the show, be sure to stop by and leave us a 5-star review. It really does help us. And thanks again for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.